Closure sounds simple when people talk about it, as if it's a door you can just walk up to, gently close, and then move on with your life like nothing happened. But in real life, closure is one of the hardest emotional experiences to reach, especially when something ended without clarity, honesty, or choice. The reason closure is so hard to get is because it asks your mind and heart to agree on something they rarely agree on at the same time. Your brain wants logic, it wants answers, it wants a clean explanation that fits neatly into a story. This happened because of this, and now it's over. Your heart, on the other hand, lives in feelings, memories, and hope. It remembers how things felt, not how they ended. When a relationship, friendship, or connection ends suddenly or painfully, your heart doesn't just stop wanting what it once had. And that gap between logic and emotion is where closure gets stuck. One of the biggest reasons closure feels impossible is unanswered questions. When someone leaves without explaining, or gives vague reasons that don't fully make sense, your mind keeps replaying the story over and over. You start asking yourself what you did wrong, what you could have done differently, and what they're thinking now. The mind hates unfinished stories. It keeps searching for meaning because it believes that if it understands everything, the pain will stop. But understanding doesn't always bring peace, especially when the answers you want don't exist or were never honest to begin with. Another reason closure is so hard is because we often look for it in the wrong place. Many people believe closure comes from the other person. From one last conversation, one honest apology, one explanation that finally makes everything make sense. But the truth is, the person who hurt you is rarely capable of giving you the closure you need. Sometimes they don't understand their own actions. Sometimes they avoid responsibility. Sometimes they've already moved on and don't feel the need to explain themselves. Waiting for closure from someone else gives them power over your healing, and that power can keep you emotionally stuck for a very long time. Closure is also difficult because letting go feels like losing twice. When something ends painfully, accepting that it's truly over can feel like you're erasing the good memories along with the bad ones. There's a fear that moving on means those moments didn't matter, or that the connection wasn't real. So part of you holds on, not because it's healthy, but because holding on feels like honoring what once existed. In reality, moving on doesn't mean the past was meaningless. It just means you're choosing not to live inside it anymore. Hope is another silent reason closure is so hard. Even when things are clearly over, hope can linger quietly in the background. Hope that they'll come back. Hope that they'll realize your value. Hope that things could be different one day. Hope doesn't always look like optimism. Sometimes it looks like overthinking, checking old messages, replaying conversations, or imagining future scenarios that will probably never happen. Hope keeps the emotional door open, and as long as that door is open, closure can't fully arrive. There's also the pain of rejection that comes with unfinished endings. When someone leaves without proper explanation, it can feel personal, even if it wasn't meant to be. Your mind may turn their silence into a story about your worth. You start believing that if you were more attractive, more interesting, more calm, or more understanding, they wouldn't have left. This belief hurts deeply because it ties your self-worth to someone else's inability to stay. Closure becomes hard because accepting the ending feels like accepting that painful story about yourself, even when it's not true. Another layer to closure is attachment. When you emotionally attach to someone, your nervous system gets used to their presence. Their voice, their attention, their validation becomes part of your emotional routine. When that bond breaks suddenly, your body reacts as if something essential has been taken away. This is why closure doesn't just hurt emotionally, but physically too. Restlessness, heavy chest feelings, lack of focus, and emotional numbness are all signs that your system is adjusting to loss. Closure takes time because your body needs time to relearn safety without that person. Social pressure also makes closure harder. People often say things like, "Just move on, it wasn't that deep," or, "You'll find someone better." While these phrases are usually meant to help, they can make you feel misunderstood. When your pain is minimized, you may feel guilty for still hurting, which adds another layer of emotional conflict. You start judging yourself for not being over it fast enough. That self-judgment delays closure because healing doesn't happen under pressure. It happens when emotions are allowed to exist without shame. Closure is also hard because it forces you to face reality, and reality can be disappointing. Sometimes the ending doesn't come with a powerful lesson or a dramatic explanation. Sometimes it's just messy, unfair, and unsatisfying. Accepting that can feel deeply uncomfortable. Humans like meaning. We like to believe everything happens for a reason. But not every ending offers a clear reason, and learning to live without one is one of the most difficult emotional skills to develop. Another reason closure feels out of reach is because of emotional investment. The more time, energy, and vulnerability you gave, the harder it is to accept that it didn't turn into what you hoped for. Your mind tries to protect that investment by holding on. Letting go can feel like admitting that effort was wasted, even though it wasn't. Everything you felt, learned, and experienced mattered, even if the ending hurt. Memory plays a tricky role too. Over time, the mind tends to replay the good moments more than the painful ones. You remember the laughs, the comfort, the connection, and forget the confusion, neglect, or disrespect. This selective memory creates emotional conflict. Part of you knows why it ended, but another part only remembers why it started. Closure becomes difficult because you're grieving not just the person, but the version of the future you imagined with them. It's also important to understand that closure is not a single moment. It's not something you wake up with one day and suddenly feel free. Closure happens in layers. Some days you feel okay. Other days, something small triggers old feelings again. That doesn't mean you're going backward. It means your mind is processing loss in waves. Expecting closure to be instant makes the process feel like failure, when it's actually progress happening quietly. True closure often comes when you stop needing answers that hurt you. When you accept that some people leave because of their own limitations, not because of your lack. When you realize that peace is more important than explanation. When you understand that you don't need their understanding to understand yourself. This kind of closure is internal, not external, and that's why it takes time. Closure is hard because it asks you to grieve, accept, and rebuild all at once. It asks you to let go of what was, without fully knowing what's next. That uncertainty can feel scary, especially if the connection meant safety or identity to you. But over time, as you focus more on your own growth and less on the unanswered questions, closure slowly forms. Not as a dramatic ending, but as a quiet sense of acceptance. Eventually, closure doesn't mean you stop remembering. It means you stop hurting the same way. The memory becomes lighter. The questions lose their urgency. The emotional charge fades. And one day, you realize you no longer need them to explain anything. You've already found your own peace, and that's when closure finally arrives, not because someone gave it to you, but because you chose to give it to yourself.